Hello and welcome back to another week of news. This is coming a day later than I wanted it to, but anyways, sorry for the delay and let's get into it. Starting off with the maintenance that we had 2 days ago, we had World Boss push rewards distributed to all accounts. You basically got a bunch of World Boss treasures. I hope you got something good from that. This is weird because it seems like this was done in compensation for the proper World Boss boxes that people were supposed to get from whatever this like login 10 minutes before World Boss spawns Friday through Sunday kind of thing that was supposed to be going on. That just hasn't seemed to be a thing. But either way, get some extra goodies there, and hopefully we see the system fixed or just more rewards coming with next week's patch for compensation for the event still not working. Next up, a very welcomed but very delayed DDoS compensation. Of course, this was promised to us 2 or 3 months ago, and we're just now finally getting it. For people from EU, you're going to be getting a lot of goodies over, as you can see here. However, there is a lot of discussion that was going on in the Discord when this was first announced, saying, well, are these rewards even worth it anymore? Is this like adequate for the time? And to that, I kind of have to say it's up to you to decide. Giving 5 Ductile Stones for free, as well as like 20 Hung Moon Blessing recovery potions, it's the equivalent of almost a week's worth of blessing that you get to just have for free, seems like pretty good compensation on top of everything else they're giving. But there are some remarks about how some of the rewards given here, like for instance the Crimson Skill Book Fragment chests, which give you either blue, purple, or a legendary page if you're lucky, shouldn't really be RNG. It's the whole idea of if you're giving people stuff for compensation, it probably shouldn't be something that they have a chance to either luck out on or just get completely shafted with. Let me know your thoughts and opinions, and with that, we basically move on to what did NA get? 20 Blessing Recovery Potions as well, and a random Silverfrost Portrait chest, Heroic to Legendary. I'm not going to complain too much about that. It's free stuff for me. I never actually suffered at the hands of any like DDoS or anything. I really don't know anyone in NA who did, but I'm sure I remember seeing a bunch of crazy stuff about connectivity issues and whatever, so either way, it's free shit. Next up, we finally get our monkey masks and fireworks from the Halloween event. There was a localization error that stopped it from getting put out on time, so we couldn't actually be running around with it in Halloween, and that makes me feel really sad. But at least we're finally getting it, but this also does raise questions of where are the other costumes? You know, that one that makes you look like you're from K-pop Demon Hunters? It's part of a 2-part event where you would think that the rewards would be doled out after the first week and then again after the second week for the individual parts, part 1 and part 2, but instead we just haven't seen the rewards from that at all in any way, shape, or form. So I'm beginning to wonder what's really going on here. Why can't we ever seem to get things on time here in NA and EU? Following that up, our last part of official news that was released today as well, at least for NA EU side, is advance notice for some things that are going to be expiring come the next patch. You're looking at Thrallbane treasures, Raging Yeti treasures from the Yeti event, and some lucky chests that came from that, as well as the event World Boss lucky treasure chests that you might get. So just make sure that you're opening those as you get them. There's no need saving onto the chest just to like have it sit there and be a dead item. But now into the really fun and interesting stuff. Back at the beginning of the week with the maintenance, there was a preview put out on the Taiwan page about the new patch coming through. So they didn't put anything out regarding like events that might be going on or Hajun's tomes or battle passes or anything, but we do have an idea of what is going to come in this next update. And it's basically what most people were expecting, but there are some interesting things that I'm not super sure about right now. To start off with, we have the dungeon that's coming out, the Snake. Everyone sees this. People are struggling with Yeti. There's very few groups that can actually clear Yeti already, and Snake's just going to be an extra level above that. Now, of course, as people get more legendary books, as people get better geared, this will eventually like fix itself over time, but it is something that's probably going to be annoying a lot of players. The fact that now we are 2 major patches in, I should say, with an even harder dungeon coming out when almost no one can still clear the first hard dungeon that came out to begin with. It definitely casts some doubt onto how NCSoft is running the idea of where player progression should be compared to the content coming out. Now, of course, there's going to be a bit more on that later in the video, but for right now, we'll finish with the rest of the patch. Outside of the Snake dungeon that's coming, and some mention of some of the mechanics going on with it, There is also going to be, of course, the loot dropping from it. You're going to be able to get psyches for both your 1 through 4 and 5 through 8 soul shields. Belts and weapons will also be dropping from this dungeon, so you should be able to start upgrading those a bit better, assuming that parties can start clearing that and put those drops on market. There's also going to be a new material dropping from it that is going to be used to upgrade your soul cores. Soul cores can now become legendary, and there's an interesting part here that I had to translate twice because the Taiwanese post is in a different language from the actual picture they took, which is in Korean. However, when you translate it all, basically what it shows is that the soul cores are going to affect your character's main skills. It's hard to see exactly how from the translation, but it looks like it counts as like some extra points for your mastery or something like that. So that way, instead of having to just completely stack books, you can get a legendary soul core, and then that legendary soul core will increase the power of your skills. The legendary soul core itself is also interesting because unlike the cores that we have now, where they're basically just static as they are, you can increase these legendary soul cores up from 1 to 5. From doing that, you also increase the power of their active ability as well as the other stats that they give you. So this becomes a lot more like any other item or equipment that we have versus just being a static core that you just throw in your weapon. Now, of course, to do this is all going to take materials. The materials that you're going to need are going to be the heroic soul core fragments that you already have in the scent stones, which of course there has to be more ways to just throw a scent stones down the drain. But also you're going to need the new item dropping from the snake dungeon in order to do this whole evolution process or craft legendary core pieces, etc. And finally, the piece that everyone has been waiting for, we thought we were getting it last patch, but at least it's finally coming now, are the Forcemaster buffs that everyone has been waiting for, or at least every Forcemaster has been waiting for. Now, Forcemaster is a class that's interesting because they were pretty much the most dominant DPS class in the game for this patch, and the last couple patches, ever since Wicked Twin became a thing, Legendary Wicked Twin and the 48 GM there. However, of course, this was gated behind a legendary skill book. If you didn't have that legendary skill book, you felt really out of the loop and actually very low power compared to many of your peers in other classes. Now, with the 48 GMs and some extra skill buffs here and there, you're going to feel a lot better about whatever skill route you went down. And of course, the Forcemasters that were already had access to legendary skill books and legendary Wicked Twins are just going to be even more powerful and even more broken. There's a lot of buffs to go over. It's just the 48 GM for Ice Rain, Dragon Char, and Blazing Beam that are the big highlights here. But to go over it really quick, for Ice Rain, you're going to get extra damage on 18, you're going to get increased crit damage on GM 30, and then on GM 48, you're going to get increased damage after using your Wicked Twin or Dual Dragon. So it kind of ties into wanting to be able to use those skills as much as possible, maybe throw in an extra book, so that way you are able to build off of that extra damage. For Blazing Beam, your 18 is going to increase your critical rate. Your 30, which is going to be the big one, is going to make it so you explode your burn stacks every time when it hits someone burning on 5 stacks. This is interesting because it makes it so that you don't have to run Blazing Palm anymore. It gives you the Blazing Palm passive on your Blazing Beam, allowing you to run the higher damaging right-click options if you want to, and I would recommend that at that point. And then, of course, for your 48 GM on Blazing Beam, it's going to give you 1 extra burn stack per critical hit, meaning that you stack those burns even faster to detonate them faster and just get all those detonation procs. This doesn't necessarily bring Blazing Beam up to like the top tier competitiveness to really fight with Dragon Char and Ice Rain, but it does make it much more viable than it was previously. And finally, we have Dragon Char, which is going to gain additional damage after consecutive uses for both its 18 and 32 GM, and then on its 48 GM, it's going to recover focus after consecutive casts. This is going to be really nice for Dragon Char users because, of course, their biggest problem is focus recovery, so now that they have a means to mitigate the focus loss and just be able to spam out way more Dragon Chars, we should see a very high increase in DPS for anyone stacking that. Now, with the whole patch rundown out of the way, and with the future kind of set there for us, I did want to take a chance to look at kind of an issue that I feel has been getting to a lot of people recently, and that's the difference between how NA and EU events are handled versus Taiwan or JP or other regions that we can compare ourselves to. Now, of course, comparisons are never the best thing to do, but it is something to kind of help keep a global parity in check when we're dealing with this kind of stuff. And NA and EU have felt like they've been getting the short end of the stick for the longest time, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons why you just see all these players leaving in droves. I know this has been a constant topic of conversation recently with just player exodus in general, but I do want to highlight maybe a specific reason or two why this might be, and also kind of touch on what the difference is culturally versus what might be expected from both the company and the player base moving forward with these kinds of things. Now, I wanted to highlight this specifically with some events and things going on in Taiwan currently, because I think it is a really good way to contrast what players get over in one area versus what players get over here. Or don't get, for a better word. To start off, there is this expectation that players in other regions will probably spend more or are more open to the idea of pay to win, gacha, etc. The idea of pay to win has become this like very common, like evil, like how dare they make it so you need to spend money in order to progress in this game. And to be fair, I'm completely with that sentiment. I hate the idea that I would absolutely need money to play this game. However, I think there are some drawbacks to having this just wholesale, like we can't have any kind of gacha events whatsoever, because it ends up crushing the rest of the economy when the top tier players aren't able to filter out all their shit into the rest of the market to allow for free to play players or players that are spending on a budget to really get access to a whole lot of other things because of market saturation or whatever forces might cause that. Now, I think two of the best ways to look at this are, or at least a cherry pick, I guess, if you want to call it that. We're going to look at the Halloween events currently going on. Now, of course, our Halloween events gave us a monkey mask, some fireworks, and we have the chance to get the K-pop Demon Hunters costume and some Soul Badge and Mystic Badge fragments, some Ascent Stones or Transformation Stones, something like that. But compare that to the stuff that maybe Taiwan is getting right now, and you can see an immediate difference. On the Taiwan server currently, there is something similar to Hajun's Tome. Now, this is of course a very pay-to-win experience. There's 15 chests that you can buy, and they're 2.5k gems each, so you're spending 25 bucks per box on all of this stuff, and it ends up being quite a significant total if you buy all of them. However, with that in mind, what you're getting from this is quite a lot of good stuff. You end up with a shit ton of Ascension Stones, you end up with a shit ton of purple fragments, and when you add up all this stuff together, you basically get 1.5 chances at trying to get a legendary book, on top of some extra like card chests, legendary chests guaranteed, all that kind of stuff. It's crazy to see that they're able to give like guaranteed rewards that get you something like very good here versus having to be like an RNG box that gives you maybe purple fragments, maybe a blue card, maybe a purple card, if you're lucky, a legendary thing here or there. But also just the fact that they have the option to do this gamba on top of any of the other stuff that's going on, whereas NA has seemed to completely withdraw from this idea of we can't have anything pay to win on here because players will get mad, so we just won't have anything at all. I personally think, at least at this point, having more things like this would be beneficial for the servers, because people who are willing or want to spend that money will spend that money, and then maybe there will be some nice trickle down for the rest of us. Outside of this gacha event, though, for Halloween, they also have the Halloween event giving them the K-pop Demon Hunters costume, but it's significantly better than anything that we've seen at all. If you look at this, it's a basic log-on event. You log on for 3 weeks, and you basically get a free roll at a gacha every single time you log on, in addition to some rolls depending on what you're trying to do for like a daily mission or something like that, whatever is going on there. Now, the interesting stuff about this is that the rewards for this gacha are incredibly good. The best reward that you can actually get is going to be some like world boss cards, a legendary card, as well as a purple selector box and a random purple skill box. They're getting a purple selector just for logging on during Halloween. Now, it's crazy because the Western audience has been asking for more and more purple selectors for eternity, and it's crazy to see that the other regions are able to get these in way easier fashion than we were ever able to. The fact that you have this just ginormic disparity between what the rewards are for one region versus what the rewards are for another is crazy. It's beyond just the idea of, oh, events will be different between different regions. I get that. But when you have just all of this shit being given to one and then nothing being given to another, of course players are going to be frustrated. Now, especially when we have content on the horizon, and even currently, that most players just cannot do because they just lack the player progression in order to be able to actually hit the breakpoints necessary for this content, and then you just have nothing being done about that. Of course, that's why you see everyone leaving. I'm not going to say Taiwan does it better, but at least in the context of this cherry-picked instance that I was able to find, yes, they do it better. And I can tell you that this is not the only case I saw, this is just the one that I wanted to highlight. Of course, it's very easy to look back and see like what's going on, or maybe not be able to be part of the server and experience what they're experiencing, but I can tell you for a fact, whenever the server looks like this on the marketplace, which is legendary books in drove, and ours just looks like a fucking graveyard, you've kind of got to be wondering, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And it has to go beyond just player population. Player population is definitely a root cause of some of this, but there is also a big reason why there's such a difference in player population to begin with, and it's really, really time NCSoft addresses some of this more publicly than just saying, hey, we're working on it. Anyway, with that rant out of the way, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, night, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.